Hey guys, how's it going? Hopefully you're having a wonderful week like always, because today, yes, I will finally be ranking all of Michael Jackson's studio albums, all 10 of his studio albums, the King of Pop, and I've been wanting to do this video for the longest time. I'm sure a lot of you have been wanting me to do this video for the longest time, and I did wrap up my Michael Jackson discography journey last year in December with Invincible. I also listened to his two posthumous albums called Michael and Escape, and I will not be including those two albums in this ranking because it doesn't feel right. Those albums were released after Michael's death, and they really don't mean anything to me, and that might sound bad to say, but honestly, I don't really care about those two items. Yeah, that's what they are. They're just items to me. Those albums just rub me the wrong way. In general, I hate posthumous albums, so I'm not going to include them on this ranking list. Now, this ranking will cover all of Michael's solo studio albums spanning just over 30 years, from 1972 with Got to Be There up until Invincible 2001. Now, I will say, out of all the discography ranking videos I've done for other artists, Michael's discography was probably one of the easier ones to rank. There were a few times where I had to switch albums around. I did revisit all his albums again for a second and third time to really... I wanted an honest, concrete ranking. I wanted this to be a true reflection of what I like in Michael's music. I did end up switching albums around here and there on the list. I moved albums down and up, but I think the final product, the final result here is something I'm very proud of, and I'm very happy with the final verdict of this ranking. Now, of course, like always, one album always has to sit at the very bottom of the totem pole, which is it's never a fun thing for me to do, but it has to be done. So in at number 10, I put Forever Michael. Now, Forever Michael was the fourth studio album from Michael Jackson, released in 1975. This album was released when Michael was on the cusp of adulthood. I believe he was around 16 years old when this album was released, and his voice started, cracking or dropping. But when obviously a boy gets to a certain age, his voice deepens. It's no longer a child's voice, and his voice is almost completely different on this album than it was on Music and Me and Ben and also Got to Be There. But putting his voice aside, I find this particular album is an album from Michael that I almost never go back to, especially when it comes to his first four studio albums before Off the Wall. I find this one to be the least interesting, for me anyway. I also personally think this is his most boring album. This album to me just isn't very engaging, and like I said already, I find it very boring to listen to. I guess my favorite songs from the album would be We're Almost There and One Day in Your Life, but for me, listening to this album is almost a punishment. I know it probably sounds horrible, but if I was given the option of having to listen to this album or not listening to any music, I would choose not listening to any music. And that might sound harsh, I don't know, but I just can't get into this album. I mean, for me personally, I do enjoy the production and his voice is fine, but I really have nothing to say about this album, to be honest with you. I will say though, out of his first four albums from the 70s, this album artwork is probably my favorite. It looks like a high school yearbook photo. So moving right along, in at number 9, we have Ben from 1972, his second solo studio album. I do prefer this album quite a bit more than Forever Michael. I do think it's stronger. And on this album, he hasn't lost that innocent, youthful, childlike voice yet. I do think his vocals on this album are great, and For me anyway, I love listening to his child voice. It's so strong and it's so unique and it always just does something to me. It's always such a joy to listen to. I do think my favorite songs from the album are probably Ben and also perhaps In Our Small Way. I mean, I do like the other songs on the album as well, but overall this really isn't a Michael Jackson album I ever really listened to. If I had to choose between this album or Forever Michael, I would definitely choose this one to listen to. I also personally feel like this album is more exciting to listen to than Forever Michael. And just like Forever Michael, that's pretty much all I have to say on Ben. Unfortunately, when it comes to his first 4 studio albums, his solo albums from when he was a kid in the 70s, I really don't have a lot to say about them. So if you're like me and you had never heard Michael Jackson's entire discography before, I do suggest starting with Got to Be There. Most people, I imagine, start with Off the Wall, which I think is the wrong way of doing it, because his career didn't start there. It started when he was a kid, and his childhood, the music from his childhood is a big part of Michael's life. It's a big part of what led him to become Michael Jackson, the Michael Jackson we know today. Even start with the Jackson 5, which is something I didn't do, which I don't regret doing. I do still want to listen to all of the Jackson 5's albums one day. Maybe next year, I don't know, but if you don't want to start with the Jackson 5, at least start with Michael's solo albums from the 70s. So we are going to move along to number 8 on my list. Now, I don't know how you guys are going to feel about this, but it feels right for me. Number 8 on my list is Invincible from 2001. Unfortunately, I really did want to like this album. It was his last official studio album before his death, and I'm sorry, I tried listening to it again after my first listen video a couple more times, and I can't get into it. I will compliment the production on this album because I do think the production is good, but when it comes to a Michael Jackson album, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it, and I know this was 2001, this is where music was headed, so it very much is a product of its time, but I don't know, just looking at the track list right now, there are a few songs that do stand out. Actually, the beginning's my favorite, and then for me, it just kind of slowly goes downhill. I do find quite a few of these songs to be lackluster. For me, I don't have fun listening to this album. I really don't. I wish I liked it more, but I can't fake it. I can't say, yes, I like this album when I don't. I think my main issue with the album is there aren't really any big hits on the album. Unlike all his other albums, monster smashes, monster hits, for the ages, timeless songs, whereas this album doesn't have that timeless aesthetic to it. You look back at albums like Off the Wall and Thriller and Bad and Dangerous and History. Those albums had big hits on them, memorable hooks, and there are a few memorable hooks and melodies on this album. One of the main reasons why I put this album higher up on the list over Forever Michael and Ben is because of the production, because I do think the production on this album is quite exciting and it's very interesting and it is fire. Another issue I have with the album is a lot of these songs sound like tracks that other pop stars of the time could have released. Whereas a lot of his older albums from the 80s, his most famous ones like Thriller and Bad, Off the Wall, even Dangerous, and History as well, there are songs on those albums where only Michael could have released. No one else could have put them out. Like, they are untouchable when it comes to other pop stars singing them. Like, only Michael could have done those songs. Whereas a lot of these songs, I could hear, like, NSYNC singing them, or another boy band or R&B artist of the time. It just doesn't have that iconic stature. I will say, though, one of my favorite songs from the album is Break of Dawn, track 4. Now that that's a hot song. So moving up on my list, in at number 7, we have Music and Me, Michael's third studio album from 1973. Now, I have a sweet spot for Music and Me. If I had to choose between listening to Music and Me or Invincible, I would choose Music and Me. His voice, I mean, I can't get over his innocent, youthful voice on this album, and I also quite enjoyed the production. To me, this is just a very pleasant album to listen to, and out of his first 4 albums from the 70s, this album in particular is an album I find myself going back to. Not all the time, but I do go back to it quite a bit. Now, I might be in the minority when it comes to my love for the album, but I really enjoy it, and overall, I do like listening to the album from beginning to end. My favorite songs from the album are tracks for Happy. Now, Happy is one of my favorite Michael Jackson songs from his first 4 albums. I love that song so much. And also With a Child's Heart, Up Again, All the Things You Are, Too Young. I generally like all the songs. There are a couple I'm a little indifferent to. But also Music and Me, track 10, that's another great song. He just sounds so sophisticated and mature for someone his age. He's just a child singing these songs, but he is wise beyond his years when it comes to his vocal capabilities. I mean, I'm not a vocal expert or anything. I love his voice during this time. Now, moving right along to number 6 on my list is his very first solo studio album from 1972, Got to Be There. I mean, for me anyway, hands down, this is Michael's best album out of his first 4 studio albums, and it's always a joy to listen to. Again, his voice, I mean, I'm gushing over it, I know, but it's just so powerful, and it's just, oh god, like, you know what? Right now, this very second right here, I'm being reminded of my first listen video to this album, Got to Be There, and how excited I was to hear his voice, and it's such a fun, playful album, and I like how his personality shines through in his singing, and I generally like all the songs on this album. Of course, I like Ain't No Sunshine, I Wanna Be Where You Are, Girl Don't Take Your Love From Me, In Our Small Way, Got to Be There, Rocket Robin, yes. And just like his other 3 albums from the early to mid 70s, Ben, Music and Me, Forever Michael, I don't really have anything to say about this album. I don't have a lot to say. I just always like going back to it and listening to it. It just always makes me feel good. So we have made it halfway on my list, and now we're gonna get to the really good stuff, the iconic stuff. I will say the number 1 position on this ranking list was always going to be number 1. I did switch albums around on this ranking list, up and down, but my number 1 always stayed at number 1. It didn't move. So in at number 5, we have History, Past, Present, and Future, Book 1 from 1995. This was his 9th studio album, and it was released as a dual album, a double disc. So the first disc had all his greatest hits from years past, and disc 2 was the new album of new material. Of course, this album was released in the mid-90s during a very tumultuous time in his life. Very dark time, a very chaotic time in his life. So a lot of the songs speak of the darkness he was experiencing, like isolation, greed, suicide, injustice. I don't really see myself going back to this album a lot compared to his other albums from the 80s and early 90s. This one, I do like it. I think it's still a great Michael Jackson album. I like what it stands for, the lyrics. I do like the production as well. There are still songs on here I do like going back to. There aren't as many songs on here I enjoy listening to as much as his prior albums before he released History in 1995. I don't think this album is filled with as many hits as his prior albums. So I don't really see myself going back to a lot of these songs. For me, they're just not as memorable. I do like the lyrics though. I like like I said already, I like what these songs represent, especially during this time in his life. I like Scream, his duet with his sister. They Don't Care About Us. Now that's an aggressive song. It's a great song. Stranger in Moscow. Now Stranger in Moscow, yes. That song, that damn song. That song has grown on me a lot. Ever since watching the music video for this song, Stranger in Moscow, it has really grown on me, and it might slowly become one of my favorite Michael Jackson songs over time. I also have a sweet spot for You Are Not Alone, because You Are Not Alone was one of the very first Michael Jackson songs I downloaded when I was a teenager. So for sentimental reasons and just for nostalgia purposes, I guess that's why it's probably one of my favorite Michael Jackson songs of all time. I do enjoy going back to this album from time to time. It's just, for me, it's not as memorable as his prior albums up until this one in 1995. I do know that there are some of you watching this who choose this as your favorite Michael Jackson album of all time. Now, I'm sure some of you might be disappointed that I'm not including Blood on the Dance Floor on this ranking list. Blood on the Dance Floor, History in the Mix, which was a remix album he put out in 1997, 2 years after History, which includes remixes of some of the songs from History, but also 5 new tracks as well. If I had to, though, if I was ranking this album alongside all his studio albums, I would probably rank this album below History. So it would be Got to Be There, and then Blood on the Dance Floor, and then History. Or I don't know. I really can't give you an answer. It's something I have to think about. Can't really give you an opinion on that on the spot. So it's something I would have to think about. I would actually have to listen to the songs again more closely. You know what? I'm comfortable with doing that. I'm comfortable with putting this album above Got to Be There, but below History. Yeah, that works for me. And moving right along, in at number 4, I have Dangerous from 1991. Now, this is an album that completely blew my mind when I first listened to it in my Dangerous first listen video. I think the initial shock of the album wore off afterward. So I'm not as mind blown with the album as I was when I first listened to it. I mean, that was an experience, something I will never forget. But I still think the production on this album is absolute fire. I remember making a comment in that video. I think I said something along the lines of, this is what music should sound like. This is music. Even here it says, there are sounds like honking, vehicle horns, sliding chains, swinging gates, breaking glass, clanking metal. Just production-wise, if we were ranking Michael's discography based on production, I mean, this album for me would probably beer. Can I get a beer? It would be B. It would be near the top. Okay. I mean, you can tell what's on my mind right now. Apparently beer. I really do like going back to this album. I don't go back to as much as the top 3 choices on my ranking list, but I still thoroughly enjoy myself every time I listen to a lot of these songs, like Jam, Why You Wanna Trip on Me, In the Closet. Yes, In the Closet. That song has grown on me a lot since watching the music video. Just like Stranger in Moscow, I think this song, In the Closet, might be one of my favorite Michael Jackson songs of all time. Down the line, next year, or I don't know. His music is still very much new to me, so I'm still digesting all his songs and singles. She Drives Me Wild, Remember the Time. I know a lot of you like that song, Remember the Time. It's not one of my favorite Michael Jackson songs, but I still like it. And the music video, the The music video, I love the music video for Remember the Time. And Can't Let Her Get Away. Heal the World's a very touching song. Black or White. Yes, 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 yes. Black or White. Who Is It? That's another song where it hasn't really grown on me since watching the music video. I do like the music video. That's that weird music video was she like a hooker or something and she has different identities? It was very confusing. But yeah, Who Is It hasn't really grown on me. I still like it. It's not really one of my favorite Michael Jackson songs. Given to Me, yes, that's a great one. Will You Be There? I kind of regret not putting Will You Be There on my top 10 fave Michael Jackson songs of all time, my YouTube short. I was going to, but I axed it, and I kind of regret doing that. So I want to redeem myself by putting that song in my top 10 list. I don't know which song I would get rid of. I don't know, but I really do like Will You Be There. Yeah, I regret not putting it in my top 10 favorite Michael Jackson list. But Keep the Faith, Gone Too Soon, very emotional, very touching song. Dangerous. So overall, I do think this is a classic Michael Jackson album, and I think it's great, the production, like I said, and it's catchy as hell. It's filled with a lot of hits too, and I always enjoy going back to it. Now, this is where it kind of got a little tricky. This is where I kind of was switching albums around because it's hard. I mean, these are like his most iconic albums now. With Thriller and Bad and Off the Wall, even like Dangerous. I mean, it was a little hard, but I kind of had an idea of where it was headed. So in at number 3, yeah, I think I'm happy with putting this at number 3. Making last minute decisions right here and now. No, yeah. Okay, it's official. Is it though? I don't know. Okay, it's official for now. I'm sure I'm gonna re-rank his albums again like 5 years from now, but okay. In at number 3, Bad. Yes. Bad. Was that a bad choice? I don't know. Okay, so I'm happy with putting Bad in at number 3. I mean, this album is just as iconic as Thriller. And, I mean, imagine putting out an album like Thriller, which was essentially probably his magnum opus, and then following that album up with an album like Bad. I mean, that almost never happens in the music industry, where you put out such a revolutionary album and follow it up with an equally revolutionary album. This album is just filled with hits. Hit after hit after hit after hit after hit. Bad, The Way You Make Me Feel. Speed Demon, the music video for Speed Demon still to this day has left me shook. Liberian Girl. I always want to say Librarian Girl. Just Good Friends, Another Part of Me, Man in the Mirror, I Just Can't Stop Loving You, Dirty Diana. I mean, this is just hits central. I mean, this is the greatest hits album of a typical musician, but this is no greatest hits album for Michael. It's a studio album. I'm just like tapping the screen right now. I'm just so overwhelmed right now. But Smooth Criminal, I mean, the music video, I mean, I don't need to tell you. And then Leave Me Alone. I mean, what could I possibly say about this album? It's magnificent. And what I also like about it is the edgier sound to it. It's more rock oriented with tracks like Dirty Diana. I mean, Dirty Diana, I really like that song. So we have made it to the top 2 positions on my list. And in at number 2, drum roll, please. Trying to build suspense. Okay. Okay. Thriller. I mean, Off the Wall was a no-brainer as my number 1. It really was. Thriller, what do I say about Thriller? I mean, if you thought Bad was iconic, Thriller is in a whole other league of its own. This is like a greatest hits album, just like Bad. This is like a greatest hits album from any other artist, but it's not a greatest hits album. It's a studio album. I mean, hit after hit after hit. Wanna Be Starting Something, Baby Be Mine, The Girl Is Mine, Thriller, Beat It, Billie Jean, Human Nature, PYT, Pretty Young Thing, The Lady in My Life. Every song on here is a bop. Every single song on here is a hit, and iconic. The best-selling album of all time, all around the world. I mean, I have nothing to say. I mean, I'm overwhelmed just looking at it. Imagine having a track list where there's Thriller, and then it moves on to Beat It, and then Billie Jean. Having those 3 songs in a row, I mean, not only is this the best-selling album of all time, it's one of the greatest albums of all time, and honestly, I feel like this is probably one of the, if not the most influential album of all time. I mean, there are popular mainstream artists out there. Since this album was released in 1982, it's still happening today where people are trying to chase that same success that Thriller had, and they never will. They might achieve half the success of Thriller, or a quarter of it, but they will never, ever, ever achieve the full status, 100% status of what Thriller did for not just music, but pop culture and the world, just being a phenomenon. I can't think of an album since Thriller that has done that. I'm sure there might have been a few albums that have kind of touched on it a little bit. And don't get me started on the album artwork. I mean, the album artwork... I need to show you guys something. Now, the other day, me and my sister were cleaning out my dad's place. And my sister one day went there on her own and she found a few things. And my dad had a lot of records. We found a lot of The Who and Elton John and the Beatles, and it really was a gold mine, and albums I've never listened to before, but I will on this channel one day. But one album we did find, look at that, this beautiful, beautiful record, vintage. I believe this is from 1982. Look at that. Look at that, gorgeous. So I've had this displayed in my bedroom. I just love it. I mean, it's safe to say that my dad had amazing taste in music. There we have it. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen, in at number 1, Off the Wall. Now for me, this was a no-brainer. This was always going to be number 1. I am just so drawn to this album. I can't even explain it, and I don't necessarily know why. There are just albums I'm just drawn to, and this one just speaks to me so much. And just like Thriller, every single song on here is a hit. There are 0 skips from beginning to end. It's just disco bliss, Studio 54, and these songs are fire. I love the production and the hooks, and I love the whole aesthetic of this era. I like what he's wearing in the album artwork. Another iconic album cover, by the way. Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, Rock With You, great songs. Working Day and Night, Get on the Floor, Off the Wall, Girlfriend, She's Out of My Life. That song it breaks my heart every time I listen to it. I Can't Help It, It's the Falling in Love, it's the Burn This Disco Down, track 10. I mean, I can't even talk, I'm so excited. I listen to this album so much, and it was a no-brainer. I am in love with Off the Wall. I'm sure some of you were maybe expecting me to put Thriller in at number 1, but no. No, sorry. Sorry, Thriller, but it has to be. I'm gonna sleep on this. I'm gonna put it under my pillow and just dream of Thriller. So that's pretty much all I have to say on my number one position. It's classic. I think personally it's flawless. And I think going forward in my life, Off the Wall will probably always be my favorite Michael Jackson album, my number one favorite Michael Jackson album of all time. I can't really choose my favorite songs from the album because I love all of them so much. If I had to, I would probably pick Rock With You, and I can't choose. I think this is the first time where I'm gonna say that every single one of the songs from an album is my favorite song, which has never happened before. There isn't a single album I can think of where every single song is my favorite. Usually there's always one or two songs that stand out above the rest, but nope. Talk about another influential album, just like Thriller and Bad. This album was highly influential. I mean, we hear a lot of artists today putting out music that sounds quite similar to Off the Wall. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say on my ranking. I'm very happy with how I rank them. This is my own personal preference. I'm sure some of you will have vastly different rankings than me. So let me know in the comments, how would you rank his albums? Which is your number one? Which is your last place? And yeah, maybe your rankings change over time. So maybe this year you have them ranked a certain way, but 10 years ago you had them ranked a different way. So I imagine I will do another ranking video of all his albums, maybe in 5 years, just to see how much the albums have grown on me. I mean, imagine having a discography where you release Off the Wall, Thriller, Bad, and Dangerous back to back in order. I mean, I feel like that's the holy foursome. That's a horrible word to use. So officially, I think that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching, guys. You can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Twitter, you can say, hey, how are you? And I'll see you next time. Take care.